Good morning. My name is Davion Fleming, Director of Admissions of Lick-Wilmerding High School. We're so excited to have you here today with us for our second open house. We have an amazing lineup of teachers here for you all to speak about their respective disciplines and to just share a little bit more about what happens in the classroom. I know that our last open house folks had a ton of questions about program and scope and sequence of some of our academic disciplines, but we weren't able to get to them. And that's because we have some teachers here with us today to speak with you. But before we get started, we're going to do a couple of rounds of introductions from folks from our team, as well as the head of school. So Eric Temple is here. Our head of school is here to say hello to you all. Hey, Eric, good morning.
Thanks, Davion. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see you. And thank you again for joining us on this episode of Lick-Wilmerding Virtual Open House. It's a new Netflix binge-worthy series. We really appreciate you being here. And as Davion said, you're going to meet three of our just amazing faculty members today and learn more about not just what they teach, but how they teach and the connections that they build with our students. And truly the relationships that happen in the classroom are core to the experience at our school. And our students are so lucky to be taught by incredibly passionate and really well-meaning and caring adults and professionals. So thanks so much for being here. I hope you have a great day. And Davion, thank you for hosting, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Eric, and thanks for being here with us today. I cannot do my job alone. I have a couple of members of the admissions team here to say hello. You'll be interacting with them a whole bunch. And so I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll start with Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you today. My name is Elizabeth Tackett. I am the Associate Director of Admissions for Operations and Flexible Tuition. We're so glad you're here today. I hope that it's a really informative time for you. And I just want to reiterate always that we're here for you. Feel free to email or call with any questions at any time. And I'll pass it over to Deja.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Deja Haley. I am an admissions associate at Lick-Wilmerding's Office of Admissions. I'm really excited that you guys are here with us to learn more about our curriculum and the courses that we offer. And I'm very excited to be going on this application journey with all of you. I hope you enjoy this session.
Awesome. Thanks to you both for all the work that you do. And I hope that you all have the privilege and opportunity to work with Elizabeth or Deja through the admission cycle. So now we get to move on to our first of our three presenters, and we'll start with Paula McLaughlin. I had the great pleasure of speaking with Paula earlier this week. She's one of our French teachers, and she's been teaching French for 20 years. And I think that I had a really great time speaking with her because we got to talk philosophy, we talked social justice issues, we talked everything. And it just made me really excited about all the really great things that she's able to bring to our classrooms and to our community. And so I'll hand it over to Paula to talk to you a little bit more about world languages at Lick, as well as French. Paula.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to talk about our dynamic and very relevant world languages department. Lick-Wilmerding offers French, Mandarin Chinese, and Spanish to our students. And as you can see from the countries on this slide, the countries that indicate where the languages are spoken, our program affirms Lick's commitment to diversity. We encourage students to learn as much as possible about each language at Lick before making their choice so that they choose what best suits their personal interests. Students are required to study 3 years of world language and must reach the 3rd level of one language. However, we encourage, and most students do complete 4 years. Students who already know a 2nd language may study a 3rd language, as exploring outside one's cultural comfort zone is very important. For students who already speak Spanish in their family, we have a Spanish for Heritage Speakers program. After 2 years in this program, students usually move into Spanish for honors. The mission of the World Languages program is to form global citizens who can communicate with others in their own language, thus promoting positive world connections. Students develop skills to communicate in real-world situations, and they gain a broader perspective on their view of the world through the exploration of culture, history, and diversity. All language teachers use a variety of modalities in order to reach all of our students. And finally, language class makes important connections to other disciplines. For example, one of my senior French students last year told me that French class was where she was able to integrate many of the other topics she studied at Lick, such as art, history, science and the environment, as well as other subjects. Additionally, each language has a public purpose course that carries out Lick's mission of civic engagement. So what I thought I would do is share with you a project we did last year, just to illustrate what a language class can be like at Lick-Wilmerding. This is an honors French 4 unit on urban or street art, and it will give you an idea of where a student who enters Lick with no prior experience in French ends up in the final year of language study. Now, by French 4, students are able to speak entirely in French during class time, and this is such an important and empowering accomplishment for them. The materials I am sharing would be entirely in French, but for our purposes, I've translated some of it to English. Now, for all of my units, I like to provide overarching questions. These are the important ideas that help students see the connections between what we are doing in class and the big picture. For this unit, the questions were, what messages do artists communicate in their art, and how does street art influence people? In order to come up with an understanding of what street art is and begin to be able to describe it, we did a brainstorming activity. Because I taught this lesson last year when we were remote, we used an online application called Jamboard, where students were able to place their ideas on digital Post-its. Now, in the classroom setting, I would have them write their ideas on paper Post-its and then go up to the board to organize their ideas into categories. This is a great visual and kinesthetic activity for producing and organizing ideas. After organizing their thoughts, the class came up with our definition of street art. I had previously researched and found an online definition, and we then compared the 2 versions. Now, particularly in an honors French 4 class, I constantly encourage them to elaborate and to go deeper in their thinking. This helps to develop both their ability to express themselves in French and also their critical thinking skills. Students then looked at examples of street art as described on Twitter, and we then discussed if any ideas came up to help us refine our definition of street art. Our next step was to take our exploration of street art into the French-speaking world. Individual students found examples of street art in different French-speaking countries, and then they each made a presentation on a different country. For example, students presented on Algeria. This one is from Morocco, and here we have Madagascar. And they presented on many other French-speaking countries as well. So in order for students to understand a bit the perspective of a street artist and to do a creative activity with their hands, we then created our own graffiti tags. First, I had students read an article in French about artists and how they choose the name they will use in their art. They then watched a video in French on how to create a tag. And these are some of the tags that my students created. In French 4 honors, students refine the skill of presenting and supporting an argument with research. For this activity, I provided pairs of students with an article either for or against graffiti. In all levels of French, I try to use authentic texts written for French people and provide students with the tools to help them to be able to understand them. In French 1, students may only be required to identify key words and try to understand the main idea. In French 4, it can still be challenging, but guiding students to highlight and classify the different ideas can help their reading and their thinking. In this activity, they highlighted in different colors ideas for and against graffiti, descriptive text, problems, and solutions. This helps them to understand the article and then to be able to discuss it later. We then came back together as a class. First, each student contributed ideas pro and con according to the article they had read, and then we added our own ideas on graffiti. As you may recall, one of our overarching questions was, how does art influence people? So I wanted to place street art into a community context. Students watched a video focusing on the creation of a mural as a community art project in Mali. Now, in order to develop listening skills, we will usually listen to a video or an audio at least 2 or 3 times, sometimes even more. The first time, students listened for the general idea, and we discussed this afterwards and looked at some new vocabulary that was key to understanding the video. Students then listened a second time and noted all that they learned from the video, focusing not only on the words, but on what they saw visually and what sort of activity was going on in the video. And finally, students discussed amongst themselves and made a list of questions they still had about the project. This was in the last few days of the school year. However, if we had had more time, we may have actually reached out to this community in Mali to ask them about the project. For our last type of street art in the French-speaking world, students watched a number of videos of performance art in different French-speaking regions of the world. For example, we watched outdoor dancers in Montreal and in Paris. Students then compared the 2 activities from a cultural perspective and compared those activities with what we witness in our own culture. These types of observations and comparisons are a foundation of our world language courses. And finally, students researched street artists in French-speaking countries around the world. They then picked one artist, contacted them, and commented on their work and asked a few pertinent questions. Here is one email exchange between my student and a French artist who had painted a mural of Ruth Bader Ginsburg that she admired. My student was so delighted to receive a response to her email and to have made this connection with a French artist. Okay, so at this point, this is the end of the unit, the students submitted their final project, which they had been working on during the course of the unit. I assigned it at the beginning. Because this project counted as their final exam, I wanted them to synthesize what they had learned during the year into a final product. I like to design end of unit assessments around what students will be able to do with the language in real life. So I set up the scenario of Mayor London Breed of San Francisco and Mayor Anne Hidalgo of our sister city of Paris, commissioning the creation of murals around their respective cities, celebrating diversity, and allowing high school students of each city to showcase what they are learning about each other's cultures, as well as the cultural diversity of our respective languages. Each student created a mural with an accompanying written proposal and then engaged in a role play with another student playing the role of a representative of Mayor Hidalgo's office. Here are a few examples that picked up on ideas in novels we read and films we watched throughout the year, as well as music we listened to and many of the issues we addressed, which included racism, anti-Semitism, immigration, education, careers. They tried to connect all of those themes together. So here's an example, and here are a couple more. And in this one, in the student's written proposal, she focused on migration, which was a thread that ran through many of our units of study. She explained the varied experiences of immigrants trying to adjust to life in France, and in her mural depicted and then explained what would be an ideal immigration experience. She wanted the mural to be displayed in City Hall and gave her reasons why. And she closed with a defense of the value of street art in our society. So I hope my description of this unit demonstrated the many modalities we use to effectively teach our students another language, as well as our commitment to the Lick mission of head, heart, and hands. The head is addressed in developing critical thinking skills as students develop reading and other interpretive strategies, as well as hone their ability to frame and support an argument. These skills are transferable to communication in their own language. We focus on the heart through our attention to social justice issues and developing compassion and empathy for others, as well as building community in the target language within our classroom. And we use our hands in the numerous art projects, the opportunity I give students to describe objects they made in shop, and the 3D models of Paris monuments we will build at the end of French 1, as well as the many other hands-on activities we do on a regular basis. So this concludes my presentation, but I would like to direct your attention to 2 links that I'm going to place in the chat. The first one is information regarding world languages on the Lick website. And the second one is a French class website that my students and I put together, which will give you maybe more of an inside look into French class. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Paula. There's a handful of questions from folks that I would love for you to answer if we have the time. The first one's coming from NATO Green, and their question is, how did you pick street art as your focus for this particular unit or this part of your class?
It was the entire year in French 4, we addressed a lot of real hot button issues. Like I said, immigration, racism, belonging, as well as education and careers and things like that. And I just thought that, first of all, street art was something that the students got kind of excited about. But also, street art is such a great way to express all these social justice issues that I thought it was a really great culminating unit to bring together what we had done during the year.
Nova, who actually has a question kind of based off of something that you said or some of the themes that you talked about. And so but in what ways are you and some of the other language teachers kind of talking about colonialism and talking about the impact of that on Native cultures?
It comes up pretty constantly. I mean, I'm going to talk about more obviously from the perspective of a French teacher, although I know that they also treat this in the Spanish classes. You know, at the beginning, like in French 1, I'm introducing my students to all of these countries where French is spoken. And I really focus on them learning about the cultures of these countries and from the perspective of the people that live there before I bring in things like colonialism, slavery, because when the Caribbean, some of our target countries are Haiti and Martinique and Guadeloupe. It's more in the upper levels that we will address this. And I'll give you one example. Last year, I mean, we conduct the class entirely in French, but sometimes somebody says something in English that is just so pertinent that I use it. And there was a Trevor Noah video over a controversy. I don't want to go into great details. He got in trouble with the French ambassador because he pointed out the number of players of African origin on the World Cup team that won the World Cup a couple of years ago. And the ambassador called it diversity. Trevor Noah called it colonialism. And so that kind of stirred up a discussion about it. But I haven't done it yet. I would love to teach an entire unit that focuses on colonialism. But for now, we treat it under other themes, and especially in the upper levels.
Awesome. And then one last question, and we talked a little bit about this when we had lunch together the other day. How do you think a student who's never taken a foreign language should choose which language to study? And this is coming from Andrew.
You know, that's a really good question. And I hope that all of the students will take the time. That's one of the reasons I put the link in the chat. We have information on our website about the 3 different languages. You can see a little bit about how each teacher teaches. You can see their syllabus, their course description. In my case, I also link it into a website for our class. And honestly, whatever the reasons are, pick the one you get excited about. Okay, there's so many different reasons. You know, I took French for very sentimental reasons. My grandfather was French Canadian. That was it. It was some students, they think it's a romantic language, or some students think it's, you know, they're interested in fashion. It could be anything, but if it motivates you, if it gets you excited, if it makes you curious, that's the one to choose.
Amazing. Thanks so much for your time, Paula. I really appreciate it, and learning more about your class. And I can't wait to stop by and visit sometime soon.
You're welcome anytime.
Awesome.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Amazing. I know folks had a ton more questions, but I would encourage you to utilize the links that are in the chat right now. Many of the questions that you have in terms of, do we get to travel to different countries? What level languages are there? Most of those will be answered on our website, so I encourage you to go there. But next we have a presentation from someone from our English faculty. Christopher Schenk is here to talk to you a little bit more about that. I love English. I know that our students who are current sophomores adore Christopher and his classes. And I spoke to some of them earlier this week. Chris doesn't know this, and they just couldn't speak more highly of him and how engaged they are. Even on Friday afternoons, they can't wait to, or rather they could wait to go to the weekend. And so super engaged. They all really love his classes, and I can't wait for you all to hear from him. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. It'll just take a second, I think, for my slides to pop up. But thank you for that, Davion. And thank you, Paula, for that amazing presentation to start us off. That sounds like such an interesting, amazing unit to the whole French for. So that sounds great. I'll start off with a little bio of myself. I've been teaching English for 16, this is my 17th year, and 7 of those this is my 7th year teaching at Lick. So that's the experience I come with. I'll today be talking a little bit about sort of the overview of the English program, and then not quite to the depth that Paula did, but I'll sort of zoom in on one of the projects that we do, just to give a sense of what English can be like from a student perspective, like what is it that they'll experience in an English classroom for us. So that is the plan for today. So here I've got sort of a visual representation of the English, excuse me, program over the 4 years. And it is a little bit sequential in the beginning, and then, you know, there's it opens up a bit. So every student takes English 1, 2, and 3, and some version of English 4. I'll kind of be going into what each one of those means in a bit. But I also want to draw your attention to our electives, which are in the yellow boxes in the sort of top right. We do have a creative writing program as well as a journalism program, and we are incredibly lucky at Lick to have such a deep bench of talent in charge of those classes. So Robin von Breton, who teaches journalism, has years of experience practicing and teaching journalism, and our creative writing classes are taught by Monica West, who just recently published a debut novel, Revival Season, which got like a glowing review in the New York Times. So that's sort of the talent we have working with our students in their fields of expertise. So now to go back to the sort of core curriculum for the English classes, 9th grade in English 1, I guess just to give a little caveat to the overview here, we tend not to have genre or topic-based years, the way that some classes will be like British literature this year versus American literature this year. We don't really have that. So that's why I'm kind of going into detail about each of the grade levels. In ninth grade, it is a lot about providing students with a common language and common classroom practices. So, students are coming in from many different middle schools, coming in from many different educational experiences, many different walks of life. And so we bring them all together and kind of talk through, how do we operate in this space together? What is the type of language that we need to be successful in this space? What does annotation look like for a ninth grade English student? And how do we discuss text? What are the formats that we use to engage with each other in discussion? So all of those things are practiced over and over in ninth grade. And also there's some, what are the small steps that go into the big projects like writing an essay? So it's sort of a foundational, but very sort of community and relationship driven curriculum in the ninth grade. In the 10th grade, in English 2, there becomes a much more major emphasis on close reading and writing. We're building on those skills from the ninth grade, but in the 10th grade, those kind of come into our focus. We go very slowly through all the stages of the writing process, and then eventually sort of pick up our pace so that the process itself is sort of the key learning in the beginning, and then we use that to produce more and more written assignments. The culminating project in the 10th grade is a large portfolio of revised work. So the way that we've divided this up, and this really started last year when we moved to remote learning, and sort of had to make some changes and then figure out, how do we teach in this space? But the way that we've divided it up is that there's a lot of initial drafts in the first semester. And again, the point is sort of that writing process of going through the steps and producing a draft. Second semester is a lot of retrospection. So it's looking back at all of those products from the first semester, seeing what kind of learning after a whole semester worth of this has been achieved, and applying that learning all the way back to those drafts in the beginning. So the second semester is really an opportunity to demonstrate mastery of everything that's been practiced from day one. And so the portfolio students in a couple of different categories have options of which pieces to revise, and then they take their time and sort of perfecting them. And there's a lot of reflection on the learning that's happened throughout the entire year. So the portfolio is sort of an equal part revised products as well as reflection on that learning. So then 11th grade is a little bit of an exception to what I said earlier about not really doing theme-based years. 11th grade is about the literature of the United States, but that is done with a real emphasis on sort of how stories are told, who tells the story and how do they shape that telling. So the reading list comprises both sort of quote unquote canonical texts and sort of American literature, but also voices that have been historically absent or marginalized. So there's also a lot of writers who are representing indigenous or enslaved experiences that aren't typically thought of as part of American literature. And so it's a development in sort of the inspection, the close reading of language to see sort of what's behind the text, what's the history behind it, what's the context, what is absent from the text that really should be spoken. 12th grade is sort of designed to maximize student choice and autonomy. So as you can see here, English 4, which is the 12th grade, kind of splinters out into all of these different options. So students will take, rather than 1 year of English 4, they take 2 semesters of English 4, so 2 different semester length seminars. And I've just provided for you in these shapes at the bottom a couple of the options that students have. And I think all of these are these are all ones that are being taught this year. Some in the first semester, some in the second semester, and they do change every year. Teachers devise the curriculum and they update it and they drastically change course. So one that used to be called, I forget the actual name of it, but it was sort of focused on sex and gender, is now kind of transformed into sci-fi at the margins. And so it's kind of taken on a more particular bent than it had in the past. So it's always sort of in flux and changing and sort of responding to the world, as well as responding to student interest. At the end of the 12th grade year, students complete a senior project as a kind of a capstone experience. And it is research-based, that's always true. But other than that, students have a lot of choice in how they construct the project and what the project ends up being. So it can be a very sort of traditional formal essay, but a much more substantial one than students have completed up to this point, and much more research-based than we typically do. Or it can be something a lot more creative. So in the, for instance, the sci-fi class, I know students last year essentially wrote their own dystopian novellas as part of their senior project. And students have done mixed genre, mixed media memoirs. So they've included poetry as well as interviews with family members, as well as sort of audio aspects as well, and fine art included in addition. So there's a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility, and it's primarily student driven, right? Students make those choices based on their interests and the skills that they've honed and skills that they want to hone, right? And so teachers guide them through it, but it really is sort of, student driven. And a lot of students have come back and said that that was a really formative experience in high school, right? Like that sort of attention to a single project that they carry out, but that they are in charge of every step of the way. That's been very important to a lot of our students. So it's something that is sort of recapitulated every year, kind of because we see the benefit and we see how students have sort of latched on to that. One thing I also want to add before moving on to sort of a closer look at a particular project is, in addition to the electives we have here, we do have a literary magazine. There's no course that ties into that, but any student can submit to that. And it's not just language products. Visual art is also included in our literary magazine. So it's another sort of outlet for student creativity and work that doesn't come tied to a class. All right, and now, so I just want to talk a little bit about one project. It's not necessarily representative of what we do every day in the classroom, but I think it does give an example of the sorts of things that we ask students to do and the sorts of things that they might experience in the classroom, as well as how we as teachers are thinking about the learning that we asked our students to engage with. So this particular project culminated in a podcast that an episode, just one, that students in groups complete. So the text that we base this on is Death and the King's Horseman by Wole Soyinka. He's a Nobel Award-winning author from Nigeria. And this play deals with a historical event that happened in Nigeria. And so the text is written in English, but a lot of the characters are Yoruban. And so the sort of language that is used, not in terms of like actually the English versus Yoruban, but sort of the construction of sentences, the reliance on idioms and metaphors and figurative language, it feels like fairly unfamiliar to a lot of our students. It's a tough text, even though it's a pretty slim one. So the way we go about it is that we have students first read all the way through it. Again, it's pretty slim, just to get a sense of characters, plot, the basics. And then we go back and have them study much more intensely pieces of it. So first, they listen to a sample podcast that the teachers have performed of the first scene. And then the remaining 4 scenes, students tackle in groups. They do a deep dive, they spend time discussing, they do a lot of research. They're looking up allusions, they're looking up cultural aspects that are mentioned but not explained in the text. And so they really come to be experts in their particular scenes, even though they've got sort of more basic knowledge of the rest of the scenes. And then they record a podcast teaching to the rest of the students. Then for homework, the students listen to the podcast that the other students, the other groups have created for them. And the students who made that podcast for that scene, they lead discussion in the next day. So another opportunity to kind of show off their expertise, as well as engage with their students and sort of collaboratively constructing the knowledge that they have of this sort of unfamiliar text. And so, yeah, that's sort of a lot smaller scale than the French 4 unit, but again, sort of, I think, an example of the sorts of things that your student might encounter. And I have here a list of reasons why. So this sort of very unfamiliar text that students build empathy with and build confidence in talking about and understanding and teaching, it is a really valuable thing. If you can do that with this text, you can kind of do that with anything. It's also, as I said, a chance to show how knowledge is constructed and how it's collaborative, that we can work together in order to understand something better. And it's also, it's important to me, and I think a lot of English teachers, to get away from just the essay as the only way that students have to demonstrate knowledge. Looking for more verbal demonstration of knowledge, for instance, and in this case, is helpful to see that students have more than one way of understanding and more than one ways of showing that understanding. And I think I will end my portion of the presentation there. I'm looking forward to hearing a couple of questions from you from the time that we've got allotted. So I'll turn that back to you, David.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. That was amazing. One of the things that really caught my attention was the depth and breadth of different classes that students can take, and how intentional and thoughtful you all are in trying to put together the curriculum for our students. And so I have another question from Nova, just asking, in what ways is the English department thinking about teaching texts or that were written by female authors or LGBTQ authors or people of color, and especially those intersectionalities, right? And so maybe it's a female identifying person who is a person of color, or a person of color who is also part of the LGBTQ plus community. Like, how are you thinking about giving our students opportunity to read those types of texts?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a great question. A lot of the text is decided on a team-based level. So the 9th grade team will confer to create the curriculum together. So that's where a lot of those discussions about the text selection happens. So it is revised every single year. I think we're very open to moving away from traditional and thinking about where are there gaps, what hasn't been represented. And just as one example of that, so this is several years ago now, but the 9th grade used to be a lot more focused on the concept of journeys, like a sort of a hero's journey sort of bent. And I don't know if it started with students or started with teachers, but somehow it became sort of evident to everyone that it was very male focused. It was, the Odyssey, it was Catcher in the Rye, it was, so it just sort of, it's the male's story. And so when that became clear, we kind of chucked that, right, and came up with a new curriculum that was a lot more representative. And so, yeah, it's team-based and constant conversations that happen every year. In addition, because I don't want it to sound like we're very siloed in those teams, in addition to those conversations, the department often meets and looks at the whole text kind of spread from beginning to end, 9th to 12th, looks at the different seminars offered in the 12th grade, and has a similar kind of interrogation, right? What's missing, what's not here? And so, nothing really gets handed to us as like, teach this. It's coming from us and our own sort of recognition of what's there and what do we need to make more space for.
Awesome. And just a follow-up question to that, and this is coming from Briggs. To what extent is student voice, right, a deciding factor for you all as you're coming up with maybe new books to read or new classes to offer students?
Yeah, that's another very important question. So so in particular in the 12th grade, there's a lot of choice for how students, first of all, they choose their own seminar, but within those seminars, there's often cases where, for this unit, students are choosing between these 3 books that they're gonna pursue, or, here is a reader of 12 different short stories, pick 3 of them that you're gonna focus on. So there's choice within limits in that sense. But then often we do a lot of reflection at the end, and we ask students to reflect in the end. How was your experience? What would you have liked to do differently or like to change? And so we try to, feed that back into for our next year. Yeah, and again, sort of, I think that the supreme exemplar of that student choice is that senior project at the end. It is so student driven and just sort of guided by the teacher, but it's really them pursuing something that they're passionate about. and willing to engage with for a very long time.
Awesome. And then last question. Can you just share with folks some of the texts that are being used this year in English 1, if you know them, but also in your class?
Great, yes. So English 1 is actually the only grade level that I haven't taught, but I do know some of the texts. So I know Aristotle and Dante discovered the secrets of the universe. It's one of them. They're currently reading The Best We Could Do, which is a graphic memoir by T. Bui, who is, I believe, Vietnamese American. And I don't know beyond that for the 9th grade. I can say for the 10th grade, the summer reading was Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. They'll also read Death and the King's Horseman, as I mentioned before, and The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. Those are the major texts that we do. And in the 10th grade, we do, as I mentioned before, it's a lot of emphasis on the writing process. So rather than large novels, we actually do shorter pieces that students can use as model text for their own writing. So we're doing a personal essay unit. So we're reading personal essays from the NPR This I Believe series. They'll be writing original poetry. So we'll be choosing some, current living poets that they can model their work on. So yeah. And for my seniors, I teach Greek tragedy is the seminar that I teach. So those are Greek tragedies.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. Really appreciate your time and your energy this morning and for answering those really awesome questions and sharing with us what's being taught in the classroom.
Thank you.
Of course. And then finally, we have Miss Yeshi Gusfield here to talk to you a little bit about history. A couple of weeks ago, I got to go to one of her classes, Constructions of Whiteness, and it was mind-blowing. The students were so engaged. They were asking a ton of really amazing questions, and they all just loved the class, and I loved being there and spending time with her and the students. And so I can't wait for her to talk to you all a little bit more about history and share with you a little bit more about our curriculum. Hey, Yeshi, how are you? Good morning.
Hey, Davion, good morning. Great to be here. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And hang on, let me just, all right. I'm going to start here and I'm going to do something similar to what Chris just did, which is talk briefly about the program as a whole, and then give you a little example of a lesson that we're doing right now in the US history course. So I'm the chair of the department. Right now I teach the 11th grade honors US history course, as well as 2 senior electives. And I used to teach the world history, so I have a little bit of a sense of what's going on there as well. All right, so just a quick overview of our scope and sequence. We are a 3-year program, not a 4-year program, so we don't offer history in the 9th grade. That was a decision, made many years ago. I'm not sure all of the things that went into it, but we start our history curriculum in the 10th grade with modern world history. And this is a course that's really designed to make sure that students are coming into the study of history with an equal footing in terms of what their history thinking skills are. So we recognize that students may not have had history since the 8th grade, since before they were at Lick, and that everybody is coming with different backgrounds in terms of what their historical thinking skills are. So the 10th grade modern world history course really focuses on teaching some of those basic historical thinking skills. What is a primary source? How do we think about analyzing it? How sort of basics behind historical analytical writing, some basics around research, citation skills, and a lot of opportunities for discussion and public speaking through presentation. Another thing that the 10th grade curriculum highlights is really trying to build a sense of community and trying to develop students' social emotional awareness because they're in a relatively diverse classroom, coming with different backgrounds and navigating potentially heavy and controversial material. I think all of our history courses don't shy away from what's sometimes called hard history, or history that can be really emotional and connected to our actual lives. One of the things that we emphasize as a department is we try to make decisions that are as relevant as possible for students, so that the history they're studying feels useful and contemporary, even if it's from the past. All right, so the 11th grade history course is an honors course. There are no AP courses in our history department. And this course is really sort of a building off of the skills that they learn in 10th grade and going a little bit deeper with all of those skills. The first semester focuses pretty heavily on the system of enslavement and how it has shaped a lot of different other aspects of US history. So starting with the colonial era and moving basically to the end of the 19th century, really thinking about like the through line of slavery and colonization as foundational to these other the development of our economy, the development of our government systems, our social norms, and how we also talk about that history. So I want to read our course questions for the 11th grade, because I think they also reveal a little bit about how we're thinking as a department. So they're listed here, but how has resistance to injustice shaped the nation? How do different groups understand injustice differently? What is the changing role of government in individuals' lives? And how are historical narratives created? How does the historical narrative actually impact the unfolding of history? So we're thinking about not just what happened in the past, but also how do we talk about what happened in the past? How have different moments in history, how have historians from those different moments changed their ideas about what parts of history they think are important, or what interpretations they're offering? So another word for that is historiography, which is one of my favorite words, or like the history of history, the study of how historians have changed their minds over time. So that's something that we also tend to focus on, especially with some of the more controversial topics, that I think is useful for students to consider, that what they're studying is alive, even if it is something that happened a long time ago. Also, the 11th grade has an ongoing current events assignment, which changes a little bit from year to year. This year, we've divided the 11th grade into small groups, and each group is assigned 1 week for the entire year. So each week they are responsible for choosing a current event that feels relevant to the course or to the material that we've been studying, and then creating a display outside of the history office that's public for the whole school, that summarizes that current event, that poses discussion questions, that excerpts articles from a variety of different perspectives. And then at the end of each week, our junior class discusses what was on the board that week. So that's a new element that is exciting and we're experimenting with right now. And then similarly to the English department, we have a number of 12th grade electives. Each elective is a semester long, and then students are required to take 1 each semester. So they will take 2 electives before graduating. And these electives, I think, are really a juicy part of our curriculum. They offer a lot of choice for students, and a lot of passion from teachers. For the most part, we've chosen electives based on both teacher passion and student feedback, similar to what Chris was mentioning earlier. Our Asian American history course, for example, was chosen really because we noticed that there was a gap in Asian American history, both in both of our survey courses. We're doing better to try to beef up our Asian American history in both of those classes, but also wanted to offer something really specific there as well. We used to have an East Asian and US class many years ago, but since that teacher moved on, we had that gap in our curriculum. So there's a variety of ways that courses get added, but we're definitely thinking about students' identities and whether or not they see themselves in the curriculum in every grade level, but in particular senior year, trying to offer a wide variety of opportunities. And the senior class is also really geared towards supporting students to do a little bit more project management and time management and independent research. So we're moving towards like students, similar to something Chris said, in certain units, students will have a lot of choice about what it is that they research specifically. We have often lots of different types of creative expressions for showing that learning. So definitely, you know, traditional research papers and presentations, but also sometimes students will lead a class. They'll actually teach a lesson after they've done their research, or create some sort of creative presentation. We've done presentations for the whole school where, you know, students are in the courtyard with poster boards of their learning, or Pecha Kucha style presentations that are more visually based, where students have to sort of keep up with a timer and edit their ideas. And I will say that the offerings are subject to change each year based on who is teaching the senior classes and what students have requested. All right, I want to go into a little bit, I just want to emphasize also that there's also quite a variety of ways that we assess students and invite them to express their learning. So one thing that we have been doing a little bit more recently, and this connects to the lesson that we're doing in US right now, is encouraging students to express their historical learning with visual art. This happens a few times a year in different classes. I know that it's, for me, some of the more powerful learning that gets to happen, because students have to think really specifically about what it is that they're trying to communicate. So they almost are coming up with a thesis for their art piece. And it always is accompanied by evidence of their research. So an annotated bibliography that really explains like what sources they use to get here. This piece that you're seeing includes excerpts of primary sources that they found in their research. And then there's always an artist statement as well that explains the topic, summarizes the research that they did, and then explains what it is we're looking at. So this piece is from a few years ago that was on an assignment about westward expansion and indigenous resistance to westward expansion. We are doing a similar project right now that I want to talk about briefly, and then I'm happy to take some questions. Right now in US history, we were just studying the antebellum era and the rise of the abolition movement that corresponds with the expansion of enslavement, both economically and geographically. And so students for this project were assigned a different resistor. So some of those resistors are white abolitionists, some of them are Black abolitionists, some of them are women, some of them of both races, some of them are indigenous people, some of them are enslaved people themselves, some of them are white people from enslaving families that were active secretly in supporting resistance efforts. And so students have researched one specific person or small group of people, are creating an annotated bibliography, creating a visual collage that's modeled off of this one that you're looking at, or other ones that I gave examples of, and then are also creating an audio version of an artist statement that will be played as part of our gallery walk when we, on the day that it's due. So we'll sort of have a museum presentation style, and then move into discussion about what were some of the challenges and opportunities of these different resistors. Resistance is a major through line throughout all three of our years. Because so much of the history is painful and heavy, it's also really important that we emphasize ways in which people at every stage of history have resisted systems of injustice. So I have more, but I think I'll stop there and see what questions there are.
Awesome, thanks so much, Yeshi. There are a ton of questions, and so I'm going to try to get to some of them. But there's a question from Grace Kim, wanting or asking if you could explain a little bit more about constructions of whiteness, which is, again, an awesome class, but I'll let you explain a little bit more.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I know that it's an unusual class, I think, to offer at the high school level. It's a class that I started about 5 years ago after the election of Donald Trump. And it was a class that I was sort of wanting to offer before that. Really just thinking about the way that we talk about race and how so often whiteness is left out of that conversation. I think that has changed actually a little bit in the last 5 years since the class has begun to be offered. But in the beginning, it was really about trying to support students to recognize that whiteness is a thing and that white identity has a history and comes from a place, not necessarily, and specifically looking at the systems that created the idea of whiteness. So where does it come from is one of the main questions in the beginning of the course. And really looking at like the system of enslavement that developed the idea of whiteness, and then how that has had impacts on a variety of groups of people in terms of systems of oppression, but also how it impacts white people, and especially the erasure of that history that allows people to sort of perpetuate systems of oppression without actual consciousness around it. So it's really about sort of trying to lay bare the system of white supremacy in a historical context. Davion, you came to my class when we were looking at, we're in a unit right now about how people become white, or who gets to be white, which has changed in a lot of different ways over history, and also has some static through lines. And so right now students are researching different case studies about like different ethnic groups and how they've attempted to gain access to the racial hierarchy at the level of whiteness, and how successful or unsuccessful those attempts have been based on what the historical context was. So, it's a complicated class, I'll say that. It's a controversial topic, and really we go in with sort of hearts open and curiosity, and like the attempt to really ask questions that are probing questions. Students are encouraged to think critically about how the topics that we study in that class have impacted them in their lives.
Yeah,
there's a lot more I can say, but I'm going to stop there.
All good. No, I think what you're saying lends itself to a little bit of a theme that I'm seeing within the questions, and it's hard for me to kind of pinpoint one person that it's coming from, but can you talk maybe a little bit more about how current events and things that are happening in our country and around the world kind of impacts the things that that our teachers, that our students want to teach and learn about in history, but then just maybe what you notice in our school as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, I think this is the beauty and the challenge of teaching history at any time in history, but in particular during times that are especially intense, like the times that we're living through now. So I think that as history, like the history department is a group of people that are very connected to a sense of justice and trying to support students to understand why the world is the way it is. So it's relatively traditional in that sense, that fundamentally we are using the tools of history to try to understand our contemporary conditions. And so what we decide to focus on tends to shift a little bit from year to year based on what seem to be the biggest controversies of the day, what seem to be the questions that students are coming in with, and that we can see that our nation is really wrestling with. And that's not an exact science. And so that's part of why we have a current events board that we're trying to make sure, we're including. There's always more that needs to be taught than we ever have time for. And so part of what we also come back to are the tools of historical thinking and the skills of research and the skills of discussion that allow students to build off of like the specific content that we decide to focus on in a given year, and continue learning after they leave our classes. That's my short answer.
I was going to say, I could just listen to you talk for hours on end, but I'll let you go ahead and have the rest of your Saturday. I appreciated your time and for sharing with us all of your knowledge and expertise, and sharing with folks all the great and important things that our students are learning in your class and at our school. So thanks, Yeshi. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Davian.
All right, so now we will transition over to having our student panel. So our student panelists will introduce themselves, and then I will ask them some of the questions that you put in the Q&A for the rest of our time together. So panelists, if you could turn on your cameras, and we can just share our names, our pronouns, what middle school we came from, and maybe in a sentence or two, share like what is one of your favorite things about Lick. And so it can be maybe a teacher, maybe it can be a course, maybe it can be something about the community, up to you. And we'll start with Eliana, if you could start us off.
Hi, I'm Eliana. I'm a senior. I went to middle school at Escuela Bilingüe Internacional, which is a small private school in Oakland. And my pronouns are she, her. One of my favorite things about Lick, I think, is the classroom environment. It's really nice to be in class with people that are just as excited about learning as you are. And everyone is super engaged with the material, and it's really discussion based. And I feel like I come out of class like so excited about the discussion we just had and like ready to learn more.
You get to choose the next person.
Ella, do you want to go?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ella. I'm a junior. I use she, her pronouns. I went to Chinese American International School for lower and middle school. And one of my favorite things about Lick is definitely the student-teacher relationship. I feel like every time you go into a class, the teachers are so passionate to teach about the subject they're teaching, and you can totally feel that in their lessons. And then I also feel like I can go to my teacher with anything, not just questions based on that specific class. I feel like I can talk to them and confide in them and really trust them. And I say hi to them outside of class. I can get lunch with them. They're just so open and supportive, and they really make the community at Lick so whole and fun to be part of. I'm going to pass it on to Raya.
Hey y'all, I'm Raya. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior. And I went to Clara Lilienthal Middle School, which is a small public school K-8 in San Francisco. My favorite thing about Lick is definitely the opportunities to try new things. I think while I've been at Lick, I've been pushed way out of my comfort zone in ways that have really helped me learn and grow, both inside the classroom and also through extracurriculars. Yeah, and I will pass it on to Sakani if that's cool.
Hi everyone, I'm Sakani. I'm a junior. I use he, him pronouns, and I went to Marin Country Day School for middle school. And I'd say my favorite thing about Lick is like the culture in the community. I mean, whenever like you're going outside, there's always something going on during lunch or after school. People are like sharing their hobbies and all that stuff through different clubs. And I really enjoy that. Go for it, Will.
Thank you, Sakani. Hey everyone, my name is Will. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a junior at Lick. For middle school, or for K-8, I went to Star of the Sea School, which is a parochial school in the Richmond district of San Francisco. And I would say one of my favorite things about Lick is just the opportunities to get involved, and also like how many different places that I feel like belonging and welcomed on campus. There's so many different like clubs and affinity spaces and like so many different sports. There's just like so many different environments where I feel like I can totally be myself.
Amazing. Thanks for that introduction. One question that came up a couple of times as some of the teachers were presenting was, how much homework do you have? What is the homework experience like for you all at Lick?
I can take this first one, I guess. So during junior and senior year, at least, the homework cap is 1 hour per class. I think it's a little bit different during COVID, but it's like really stressed that like if you're doing 1 hour of homework per class, like you just have to cut it off there, even if you're not finished, and teachers will be super accepting. But it usually doesn't reach up that far. I think I only work on homework for an hour if I have like an essay or a project due. But the thing about homework is you have 2 days to complete it. So you have a class on Monday and then you'll have it again on Wednesday. And so you have a whole extra day to complete it, even though you could be spending a decent amount of time on like those bigger projects.
Yeah, building off of what Sakani said and also what Ella said earlier about like the student-teacher relationships, I think like something that's really nice about like is that the teachers are super, super understanding because they know that we have a lot of stuff going on, like high school with like sports and like social things and like a bunch of extracurriculars, like everyone has a lot going on. So I think teachers, like if you let them know like what's going on in your life, they'll be totally understanding and they'll be like really willing to give you like extensions if you need it on like essays and things like that.
I think that something that I want to add is that I found that at Lick, in middle school, I felt like I was doing a lot of busy work for homework, but the homework feels really intentional to either prepare you for the next class or to help you engage in discussions. So I don't really feel like I'm just doing worksheets. And when I come to class, like there's pretty much always a discussion about what we did for homework and how it relates to class. So I feel like the teachers are super intentional about making sure that like you know why you're doing the homework and how it impacts you in class.
Awesome, thanks. I have a very kind of nuts and bolts question here from Ian, and just how many classes do you take at a time? So, Eliana, maybe you can just talk about like what does the schedule look like? You know, how many classes do you take a day? How many classes do you have in total? Yeah, if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So the schedule, at first glance, it looks a little overwhelming, but it's honestly super simple and like really, really catered to like help students be less stressed, which I really appreciate. So there's 8 blocks in total, A through H, but there's only 4 blocks a day. So one day would be A, B, C, D, and the other day would be E, F, G, H. And every year other than freshman year, one of those has to be a free block. A lot of freshmen have free blocks too, but if you want to take a performing arts elective as a freshman, that would take up your free block. I had that because I'm in choir, and it really wasn't a big issue because it was freshman year. And then, yeah, so you have classes, 7 classes-ish, and then a lot of upperclassmen or seniors will have 2 free blocks to balance college apps. So I have a free block right now and an independent study. And then freshman year, it's really nice because you have all these classes built into your schedule that aren't super, super academic. I'm not sure if you already talked about this, but so you have contemporary media and art, design and technology, and body-mind education. So the work for those classes, it'll be like, oh, I have homework, but it's an hour of drawing or an hour of like sketching out a design for my lamp that I'm gonna build, or super creative stuff that's just built into your schedule, just as a normal academic class would be. Did I miss something, or is that?
No, I think you did a great job. So there's a question. Thanks for that, Eliana. There's a question about clubs. How many clubs are there? What are the different types of clubs? What things are you all involved in outside of classes?
Yeah, so I can answer this question. There are over 80 clubs at Lick, which is incredible. And we have 2 types of clubs. We have PM and AM. PM is passive membership. They usually meet 1 to 2 times a month. And then AM is active membership. Those are the more serious clubs, and those meet once every 8-day rotation. So examples of more serious AM clubs would be Girls in Tech, I believe there's different affinity spaces and affinity groups that are also clubs like Squid. And then PM clubs, examples of kind of less serious clubs. I think there's a Harry Potter club, there's the Egg Club. There are a ton of other really fun clubs you can also participate in. I run the Women in Neuroscience Club because I'm really passionate about science. And so that's something I'm a part of. I'm also part of Girls in Tech because I wanted to be exposed to that world, which is really male dominated. And I have so much fun because you get to work in a space with people that are passionate about the same things that you are passionate about and connect with them over common interests. And then I've met so many new people that are in different grades that I otherwise wouldn't be able to meet. So that's kind of my club experience, if anyone wants to add on.
I mean, I can add on. I'm part of a active membership club called BSU, which is the Black Student Union. I'm actually on the e-board. And the active membership clubs and like the affinity groups all just stress kind of like creating a safe space for like different minorities around campus. So if you ever feel like you need like a place to come or anything like that, then you can always join one of those clubs that you feel you resonate with.
Amazing. Thanks for that. Let's see, Ryan, Will, there's a question here just asking about your transition to Lick, especially coming from a public and parochial school. And so can you just describe what that experience was like and how or in what ways does Lick have, infrastructure to try to help with that transition?
Yeah, I can start. So I think the first big thing that really helped with my transition was, I think, frosh orientation, which is just a period of like 2 days where you get to like meet your like advisory group. So we have this thing called like advisory, where essentially like each group of, I believe, like around like 11 to 12 kids is paired with one like faculty advisor. And that was really helpful for me, just because I was the only one who came from my like K-8 school. So I was honestly, like, to be quite honest, I was like really, really scared going into like, I was like, I'll be eating lunch alone. And like, I was just really nervous about it. But the advisory really helped me. I got to like, it just helped me like make some friends like that I felt like solidified with. And also something else that really helped me was like, we have this thing on campus called Frosh Hill, which is kind of like I wouldn't say like a ritual, but it's kind of like a rite of passage for like Frosh to like sit on Frosh Hill. It's just this like really beautiful like turf like hill on campus that like a lot of Frosh will sit on freshman year. And I remember like everyone I think one of the first days we just were all in like a huge circle and we were like all talking, which really like helped me feel like I was a part of the community. Even though like I was only one from my middle school, I got to like meet a bunch of different people on Frosh Hill, and that really helped me. Rye, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, no, Will, that was awesome. I think something else that was really helpful for me was actually joining a fall extracurricular. I think Will actually joined cross country as well. Maybe I'm wrong. But I've had this conversation with people, but like it doesn't necessarily need to be a sport, but like a club or like the fall play. It creates a space where like you can find community in places where like you have to be. So you're not, looking around for a friend group, which is how a lot of Frosh feel. I think for me, my transition was actually, it was challenging in the sense that it was obviously new people. I'd been at my school for 9 years, so that transition is tricky for everyone. Coming to a new place where you don't necessarily know the campus, you haven't really been introduced to the students that you're in classes with, I think is a hard transition, and that happens at every high school. That being said, I think at Lick, the teachers are super accessible. I found that there were, safe spaces everywhere where I could go chat with teachers. I could chat with my advisory. I utilize the Learning Strategies Center a lot, which is the LSC. And that kind of helped me with transition in terms of, time management and figuring out, what my workload looked like and how I can balance that with being a student athlete. So as much as the transition was challenging, I think that there are a lot of resources on campus to support students, and everyone's going through the same transition. It looks different with every student. Every student's experience is super different, but you're all on a new campus with new people. So I think that I found some comfort in that.
Beautiful. Let's see, one of the things that I think makes Lick really distinctive from some of the other schools in the Bay Area is our public purpose program. And so can a couple of you just talk about your experience with PPP and in what ways has it been integrated into your everyday experience in the classroom or maybe in classes that you take?
Yeah, I can start. Something I really like about the PPP program is that it's really like integrated so much into like the school culture and like your everyday experience. So for example, I was in PPP classes. So there's the PPP program for freshmen where you have workshops, but there's also classes that upperclassmen can take to get their PPP credits. But because I was in a higher level Spanish class, I was in PPP classes. I've been in them my entire time at Lick. So my freshman year in my Spanish class, we went to an elementary school and like taught the kids lessons about what we were learning in Spanish, which was like an incredible experience for me. And it's also kind of helped me hone in on things that I'm interested in and passionate about. So for my sophomore year PPP hours, I was part of the Lick community tutoring program where kids from schools from around San Francisco will come to Lick. Now it's on Zoom, but it was in person. And you kind of get to know these kids, like talk to them about their lives, like really make connections with them, and then also like help them with their homework and like support them in those ways. And I'm really passionate about working with kids. So that was like a really incredible experience for me. And then just overall, the like mindset of a PPP class really pushes you to like question system. So I'm in a PPP ethnic studies class for my English class this year. And we're like writing project proposals about like things we want to change within the Lick-Wilmerding community and like sending them to the administration and like really making like active change about things that we're passionate about inside of Lick and outside of Lick, which is really cool.
I just wanted to add on to that because Eliana, you were talking a lot about how this idea of social justice is so ingrained in the culture at Lick. And I think it's not only this idea of social justice in classes and at school, but also how that affects you as a person and how that makes you inspired to contribute back to your community outside of the school as well and shapes you as a person. A year and a half ago, I started a tutoring program that tutors bilingual children from China. And I think that was really driven because of the social justice initiative and the learning environment at Lick that fosters this idea of social justice. And I really don't know if that would have happened if I didn't go to Lick, because I started learning about how I can have opportunities to give back to my community, even outside of school, even if I'm not taking a PPP class. So I think just the environment that Lick fosters for social justice inspires you to give back outside of school and get involved in your community outside of school as well.
Awesome. Quick poll, so you can just raise your hand. And how many of you currently do not live in the city? Cool. So can you just share with folks where you live and how do you get to school?
Yeah, so recently I moved to Palo Alto. I used to live in the city, but I moved here over the summer. It's been an interesting transition. But Lick is really situated in like a perfect spot. Like you can hop off BART and you're like right at the school, like right there. And there's also buses that go like basically to the same exact street, which I think is really helpful for a lot of people who live, especially like in the East Bay. But for me, not having my driver's license yet, I take Caltran and then I hop onto BART and then I'm just right at the school, which is really convenient. And I think that getting to like other schools in the city from Palo Alto is just something that's you don't even really think about. But with Lick, it's been like a lot easier of a commute as to like if I had to gone to like grammar. Like if I would have had to have gone to like a different school in the city or something like that. When I moved, I would have had to switch schools, which would have sucked. But because Lick is so close to the BART line and so accessible, it was really easy.
I commute from the East Bay. I live in Oakland. So I take BART most days. I also have my driver's license, so sometimes I'll drive in and carpool with people. But again, it's like Rockridge BART. If people live nearby, it's like 35 minutes exactly to get to Lick, which is really not that bad. It's actually really nice because you can just do your homework on the train. There's also a huge commuter culture at Lick. Most kids are commuting from somewhere in the city, like very few students actually live really nearby the school. And so a lot of kids will stay on campus late maybe and do their homework, which is really nice. And then just in general, like most people have to commute. So it seems like it just doesn't seem like a huge thing. And also like for me coming into my freshman year, like the school, I think it was the school, like connected us with other kids, or we just like found each other on BART. So like there's like a group of like 10 kids that I've taken BART with like every single day since freshman year. And like some of us have like different friends, but we have this like little like BART community that's like stayed strong over 4 years, which I think is really cool. And like that's true with every grade. Like there'll always be a community of like East Bay kids or Peninsula kids that will like carpool together and commute together. And it's a really nice way to build community.
Awesome, thanks for that. Speaking of community, one of the things that I think makes our school really special is how diverse and inclusive the community is, right? Like diverse on a lot of different levels. We have about 15% of our students coming from the East Bay, another 15% or so coming from the Peninsula. Racially is pretty diverse. From an economic standpoint, it's pretty diverse, but it's also diverse in terms of how folks identify, right, from a gender perspective or sexuality perspective. And so can you talk a little bit about how or in what ways does the school kind of welcome everyone despite of their varying identities, or because of their varying identities, right? Like how does the school feel in terms of a welcoming culture?
Yeah, for me, I think the first thing that comes to mind is affinity spaces. So I went to I would say a fairly like predominantly white school from K to 8. So I didn't really feel like too much belonging there. I kind of felt like I was always like the Asian one at school. But then I think at Lick, like I joined the Asian American Students in Alliance, which is our Asian American Affinity Club in my freshman year. And like, that was just like a really cool space because I felt like everyone there was like me and I felt like I could really relate to them, which really felt like, made me feel like I was at home. And it just made me feel really included in the community. And like, I just felt super like integrated into Lick. And I think that's something that I really, really appreciated as a freshman, especially since I was the only one from my middle school who came. And I think there's a bunch of other different affinity spaces, like Sakani was talking about BSU. I know there's a lot of, I think there's Squid, which is a space for like queer identifying people. That's like, and all of these spaces are really like safe spaces. Like, I think in all of them, they emphasize like confidentiality, where what is said in the space kind of like stays in the space. And like, I think that's really good because it just really helps me to feel like really like included at Lick.
Great. Thanks for that, Will. Let's see what question I want to ask you all next. Maybe we can go around and everyone answer this. But what are your 1 or 2 favorite classes that you are currently in or that you've taken in the past? Get 1 or 2. I know it might be hard. Eliana's dying over there. She's like, I don't know.
This is definitely the hardest question that we've been asked so far. Okay. I feel like I've taken a huge range of classes. So 2 is really hard. Davion, really? Okay. I definitely think anatomy and physiology has been one of my top classes. I don't know if y'all have taken it. That class is so cool. Like, I had never really been, so my science education coming into Lick was a little iffy. I had never really been in like a lab environment. So, coming into Lick, getting used to the lab environment was really cool. And then I took this class called AMP junior year. And I actually took it virtually for the majority of the year just because of COVID. And it was still one of the most engaging classes I've ever been a part of. We were doing dissections, you learn about the human body, and just, it is really cool because you actually relate to it because you have a body. So it's like, it was just so cool. I was so excited about it. And then my second favorite class that I've taken while I have been like is definitely my dance class. I've been in dance since I was a freshman. And it's cool because like as people have talked about, like the community totally grows. So like a lot of the people that start dance freshman year stay in dance till senior year. And that has just been like a really cool class. I wasn't really a dancer, and then coming in, it's just been awesome. So yeah.
I can go. It's a really hard question because I feel like I have never had a class at Lick that I disliked. Like I say that very confidently. I've liked every single one of my classes. This year, because it's hard to, if I think of all the years, there's too many, but this year, two of my favorite classes are brain and behavior, which is our psychology class. It's like fascinating. It's just like, it's really applicable to our own lives. And like, right now we're learning about social psychology. And like this week we had to like journal about like examples of social psychology that we noticed like at Lick. And we just like talked about it for like 30 minutes and like really dissected like why people act certain ways in social situations. And then similarly, my history elective this semester is the Holocaust and genocides, which seems kind of like intense, but it's so engaging. And our teacher, she's like really studied it for a really long time and has taught the class many times in many different schools, and like is really knowledgeable at the topic. And it's really focusing on like human behavior and like bystander behavior, and like really trying to understand the whole human experience behind atrocities and like why they happen. And it's just a really fascinating class. And I also, in general, the English and history classes at Lick have been some of the most like interesting educational experiences I've ever had.
I can go next. Similar to Eliana, one of my favorite classes would have to be B&B. It's just so engaging. Like you can go into that class and just have a discussion that will last the whole class. And like everyone's contributing and I don't know, digs deep into your psyche. But like right now we're doing social psychology, but before that we did like a lot of things. I think the biochemical unit was super fun. We got to like actually touch human brains, which is still a little bit surreal. And that was super fun, and like learn about like what all the hormones and like different parts of your brain connect to and like how that affects how we function as humans. I don't know. It's just super interesting stuff. But for my other second favorite class, I'd have to go with freshman year D&T, which is basically just an overview of like all the different shops classes. And it's definitely something that you would not find at another high school. It's also known as like the lamp class, if you guys have heard of that. And it's just like a tour through like all the different like metal, wood, electronic, fabrication, all those different shops. And I thought that was super fun and enjoyable.
Awesome. I can go next. I would say one of my favorite classes I'm taking right now is chemistry honors, which builds off of your 10th grade chemistry science requirement. And I loved chem in 10th grade. It was one of my favorite classes, and I'm just kind of a science person in general. I love science, and chem honors has been so interesting. We've already done 3 or 4 labs and full lab reports. We've already gotten to really immerse ourselves in the experience. I love the teacher. I feel so connected with the chem teacher, Miss Bergstedt, and so that's just been an incredible experience. And I would say another class, this one's hard. I feel like, okay, maybe jewelry. I would say jewelry in the shops, because when I first came into it, I was thinking, oh, maybe it'll be just kind of stringing some beads on some wire, making some little necklaces. It's completely different. It's not anything like that. We learned how to use so many different tools and machines. We had to weld some pieces of metal, which was so interesting. We had to like bend the metal, shape it, and it was just completely not what I thought it was going to be, and completely changed my perspective on jewelry as a whole. And I'm taking jewelry 2 now next semester because I enjoyed it so much.
Ella, you're making me want to take jewelry now. But I think my favorite class at Lick has probably been rethinking furniture, which I took last year. And it is just a great class. I think it's a class that's focused mostly in the metal shop, but essentially what you get to do is like pretty much like in the class name, you get to like make your own furniture. You get to explore more deeply in the metal shop, like welding, cutting metal, bending metal. Is just super, super cool. I actually made this like hammock chair that I like actually like use all the time now. It's just like sitting in my room, and whenever I want to relax, I'll like can sit in my chair and I'll be like, yeah, like I made this in class at Lick, which is really, really cool. And for my second favorite, call me crazy, but I think my pre-calculus honors class this year has been really, really fun. I enjoy math. And like, I think Eliana touched on this earlier, how like the classroom environments are like super, super like involved. And like, there's a lot of like collaboration going on in math. Sorry about that. Like I think the environment in math is always like, because I mean it is difficult, but it's really nice that you get to go through like that difficulty with like all of your peers. And all of my math classes that like I've gotten really close to my class, because I think it's just really nice to like get involved. Like the math classes like really emphasize collaboration, so you're always like working together. You can like draw on the board, and it's like really fun, because I didn't really enjoy math before I came to Lick, but now I think I look forward to my math class every day, because I know I'll be able to like talk to my peers, and it's really, really fun.
Amazing. Thanks for that. Okay, last question. This one might be harder, but in one word, how would you describe Lick? And in your one word, if you want to use a hyphenated word, right? So that's okay, but then there's only one word on each side of the hyphen, okay? So if you want to say like fun loving, right? Like that has a hyphen in there. You can do that. I stumped him, y'all. I don't know what to say.
Are we allowed to like elaborate, or do
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah, super quick elaboration.
Okay.
Okay.
My word would have to be passion. I feel like all the students at Lick are super passionate about everything they do, hobbies, school, social life. Like they really just strive to be the best. And I really enjoy that culture.
I would probably describe the community as vibrant, because there's always something going on. There's always people, just like Sakani was saying, pursuing their passions, different clubs. When you walk out for lunch in the courtyard, someone's always having some sort of bake sale. There's candy being given out. There's sometimes live music being played. The community is just so vibrant, and something is always happening, and it just makes it such a wonderful community to be a part of.
My word would probably be engagement. I think our students are really engaged in like all aspects of like the Lick experience. So our classes, our like extracurriculars, clubs, like everyone is just kind of, it seems like putting their all into everything that they do, and really cares about it and are super engaged. So.
Okay, I think my word, which doesn't really make sense until I explain it, would be try. I think ever since I have like come to Lick, everyone has like encouraged me to try new things. And like now as a senior, I actually feel really prepared to go to college and learn how to advocate for myself. So I think that kind of is incorporated into that word.
Yeah, my word would probably be like tight knit. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think everyone is really like kind of just involved, not only just like in the community, but also just like with each other. Like there's so many different opportunities to just like talk to other people, meet new people through like sports, clubs, all of that. And I think the community in general is just like super, super close, and everyone plays like a super important role in the community, which I really like.
Amazing. Thanks, y'all. I appreciate your time coming here on a Saturday to talk a little bit more about your experiences. I always learn something new, and I'm always, after listening to you all, inspired and grateful to you all, but also for our high school, because it's super special. To everyone who came on today, thank you so much. I know there were a ton of questions that we did not get to, but I encourage you to utilize our Connect with the Tiger Ambassador. Deja just put that link in the chat there, and then we'll find a way for you to connect with one of our students or one of our parents. And always feel free to reach out to us via email, or you can call us, and we're happy to have a conversation with you There's a ton of different events that you can also come to, from our student-led virtual tour to our weekly office hours. So please, please, please reach out to us. Happy to connect with you all. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Eat some ice cream or some other sweet treat that you really like. That's my favorite. And we'll see you all next time.